About a third of the way into Spider-Man Far From Home is a conversation between Spider-Man and Mysterio that may be generic superhero blather, but struck me pretty deeply while I was writing my feature-length series of anniversary reviews. The question of what I, not a superhero, want to do versus what I feel I have to do versus what I have been told I should do has far lower stakes and means nothing to most people. But in that moment, it was something I needed to hear. And honestly, a narrative's impact often says at least as much about the person impacted as it does the story itself. The performance of the scene was really what sold me on the part of both Tom Holland and Jake Gyllenhaal. And as I watched Gyllenhaal totally kill it, I was struck by a thought. Damn, I'm gonna spend a ton of money to see this dude on Broadway, aren't I? Yeah, please support me on Patreon. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me contentedly not a parent. And today, I'm talking about Seawall, A Life, which is playing at the Hudson Theater through the end of this month. The Hudson Theater is the same venue that I saw Burn This at earlier in the year, so I am keenly aware of the fact that I did an entire rant about the issues of having movie stars clog up Broadway stages and the sheer hypocrisy of my continuing to support them. But in my defense here, Seawall A Life is not a revival or an adaptation, but new and original works. And by golly, those need all the love they can get. I didn't actually know it until I got into the theater, but the slash in Seawall / A Life is not just a cute naming convention. It is separating the titles of two different shows that are being performed together, each a one-man monologue about life, death, and parenthood. This actually marks the second time in just a few weeks that I have seen two shows performed as one, though the combination of M. Faniso Udofia's Run Boy Run and In Old Age, which is currently playing at the New York Theater Workshop, runs more than twice as long as Seawall A Life. It's absolutely worth the time, though, and I really love what New York Theater Workshop puts on and think everyone should support everything that they do always. The set is sparse. A desk, a piano, each always present but only to be used by one performer. There are stairs to a second, even emptier level, stage lights. Honestly, it's a little odd for a Broadway show to feel so off-Broadway. Broadway productions tend to feel expensive to help justify those ticket prices, but Seawall A Life, and A Life in particular, doesn't. The simple set is quite appropriate and well composed, but it hardly screams Broadway. There are just two brief, though genuinely incredible moments of projection that push it beyond something that the average person could do in their living room. But I respect the decision to not succumb to what must have been a strong impulse to use the bigger budgets for something more objectively impressive. I would rather have this material be under than overproduced, because much more would distract from the performers, and to make it a larger-than-life spectacle would diminish their humanity. Our first human is Alex, played by Tom Sturridge in Simon Stevens' Seawall. Stevens is best known to me as the guy who adapted The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which was easily one of the most impressive theatrical experiences I have ever had on Broadway, though a friend of mine saw the West End production and said that it was massively more powerful because it was done in a smaller space and also in the round. And I'm sure it was super cool, but not all of us get to go to the West End, Josh, so just let me have this one, all right? Seawall is certainly much more subdued than that. A straightforward but deeply affecting story of a man's relationship, the birth of his child, and a particularly traumatic death in the family that he was witness to but could do nothing to stop. And in that order. Starts all happy, ends all sad. You know the type. Less conventional is A Life, written by Nick Payne and starring Jake Gyllenhaal as Abe. I only know of Payne tangentially in that I saw the trailer many times for his single credited film, The Sense of an Ending, but never felt compelled to actually check it out when it released, where Alex's story follows a basic path of event, event, event. Abe is forced to contend with two life-changing experiences simultaneously: the death of a father and the birth of a child. And so he must tell these stories simultaneously as well, flowing between them without any indication of where one ends and the other begins. The inevitable confusion caused by these constant switches resulted in arguably my favorite moment of the show: the silencing of the night's biggest laugh. In the story we didn't realize he had left, the line he said was hilarious. In the story he was now in, it was not. And for a few blissful moments, we were collectively laughing at an image that was all of a sudden extinguished and everything got dead quiet. It made the line, which was dramatic enough on its own, feel like a punch to the gut. And I loved the way that it forced me to stay mentally alert, and I just generally appreciated it as someone who has some amount of difficulty staying on topic. Because of this, I was much more present during a life than Seawall. Unfortunately, I often find that my mind wanders a little bit during the slower moments of plays. This happens with movies and other shows too, but it's definitely most common at the theater. And I'll admit that I missed some lines here or there in the first half. I don't even know what I was thinking about, to be honest. Probably this video, which is often what I think about when I'm experiencing something that I intend to review but have a moment, which is an unfortunate but kind of inevitable aspect of criticism. To be clear, this isn't actually a knock on the production or its quality. It's simply a fact. My inner monologue is louder than this outer one you've decided to subject yourself to. Can you even imagine? And also, it seems, a bit louder than Tom Sturridge sometimes. The fourth wall, as it's traditionally conceived, doesn't really exist in a one-person performance because it is directly relaying a story to the audience. A traditional ensemble piece can be performed for no one. A solo monologue cannot. But that doesn't mean that the audience is an explicit part of the performance. Seawall's first introduction of the audience actually came before it began. Sturridge was on stage eating what appeared to be some kind of Asian takeout, and suddenly the room went quiet. He looked out at us. "It's not starting yet," he said, except, in a British accent. But the show, in general, is not particularly participatory. Say that 5 times fast. Got your next hit vocal warm-up right there. It's him saying things, and when he poses questions, they're all rhetorical. Do you want to know what I said? But without waiting for or even wanting a response. With one bizarre exception. He stumbled over his words while discussing the night of his daughter's birth, and then asked us for help. He had forgotten the word scrubs. And it was several seconds before anyone in the audience spoke as he awkwardly described the things that doctors wear during surgery, because nothing before, or indeed after, set us up for participation. And I have thought about this moment nearly every day since. If you've seen the show, please let me know in the comments if this happened during your performance, because the scene plays very differently if it's intentional, which I assume it must be, or a genuine mistake, taking advantage of the fact that there are several hundred people sitting there with mostly rapt attention. Its one-offedness is what makes it strange. Of course, we, the audience, exist, and he knows we exist, and our energy is feeding into everything he does, but this forced interaction totally breaks the flow of the story in a way that felt unjustified. Jake Gyllenhaal's moment with the crowd was also singular, but both funnier and more character-appropriate. At a moment when he's searching for batteries frantically, he runs off stage into the audience, and as he ran back, instead of just taking the aisle up, he pushed through the second row with the audience there. "Excuse me," he shouted as he rushed through them. "I'm sorry, almost there. You can go back to sleep in just a sec." And I couldn't help but think that the people in the front row must have been super pissed that they didn't go one seat back. Certainly, I would have been. Abe, as a character, of course, is a bit scatterbrained. This sort of silly thing is totally the kind of thing I could see him doing. And I don't know if someone was actually falling asleep in the row or if that was a pre-written line, but it was hilarious and felt natural either way. Which gets at something else that's interesting about one-person shows in particular, which is the presence of the writer's voice. Most of the one-person shows I've seen were performed by the person who wrote them, and in only one case was it fictional. And I didn't even know it was fictional because it didn't occur to me that it could have been fictional, so that was quite the mindfuck when I realized almost 3/4 of the way through that the performer was not actually the parent of a young child killed in a school shooting. Seawall and A Life are, as mentioned, not written by their performers, and they are both certainly untrue. Neither of those things is inherently a problem, but it results in more obvious oddness if the voice doesn't fit the person. For example, Tom Sturridge is British, and yet he says fate and miles per hour, and it's like, dude, I can hear your accent, and I know that you don't think in US customary. A British person telling me how many inches long something is takes me out of the moment because it feels artificial. It's not like he said 10 meters, or what do you folks use here, feet? It's 30-ish feet. Or something that acknowledges that he is speaking against the way he and the rest of the world have been trained to measure distance. He's just lying to us. And in that moment, we know he is lying. The moment passes quickly, and there aren't too many like it, but they stick out because they are exceptions to what are otherwise exceptional performances. Far more often, these actors do not seem to be acting. The fact that we were in a Broadway theater watching Tom Sturridge or even Jake freaking Gyllenhaal faded into the background. And as they stood on that stage and looked out at us, they were just Alex and Abe, two people happy for the chance to tell their stories. 8.4 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hamry and Marco, Kat Saracata, and Benjamin Schiff. I have a Patreon with early access to videos and some other things. If you would like to do that, I would appreciate it. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.